Welcome to our video on the fascinating topic of de-dollarization. In recent times, this term has been making waves, capturing the attention of experts and everyday individuals alike. Everyone needs to grasp the concept and understand its significance. De-dollarization refers to the global trend where countries, companies, and individuals actively reducing their dependence on the US dollar in international transactions. The implication of this widespread movement extends far and wide, influencing the value of the dollar and the stability of the global economy. It's a transformation that impacts businesses, investors, and each one of us. Join us as we delve into the intricacies of de-dollarization and explore its profound implications. In this video, we will unravel why it matters and why you should pay close attention.
For all of our lives, the dollar has been the king of currencies around the world. But is that about to change?
In recent times, the dollar's dominance has been called into question.
The consequences would be too ugly, really ugly.
So get ready for the dollarization revolution that lies ahead. Prepare to embark on a journey that will challenge your perceptions and reshape your understanding of the global financial landscape when a singer unfolds. Americans have benefited dramatically from the dollar status because it allows them to live beyond their means. Why is that? They don't have to produce to consume. They just have to print money, which costs almost nothing. Did you know that printing a dollar bill costs just under 6 cents? That means the $100 note costs under 16 cents, creating valuable money out of thin air. Yet, exchange that paper money for assets and real goods that are produced by hardworking people from many different regions of the world. Unlike the dollar, these goods are not created out of thin air. They require actual resources like land, labor, capital, and etc. Resources that could have been used for something else that benefits those people. But instead, those resources end up helping to produce stuff for America simply because America prints the dollar. I am saying this because it is important, given the topic, and as we journey through this video, this segment will help clear a thing or two. To understand how the dollarization is dangerous, we will need to learn how the dollar became so powerful and dominant. Where do we even start? Okay, let's begin here. You see, it is obvious that banks are in turmoil nowadays, but a bigger financial crisis is looming from something else, the United States dollar. In the old days, the United Kingdom's pound was the primary reserve currency for much of the world during the 19th century and at least some part of the 20th century. However, by the middle of the 20th century, the United States dollar had become the world's superior reserve currency after the US emerged as a stronger superpower during the First World War. America's might grew further after the Second World War, thanks to the Bretton Woods Agreement. America played a central role in establishing a post-war international monetary system at the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944, making room for the US dollar to become the primary reserve currency, but also creating institutions like IMF and the World Bank, further cementing American economic influence and shaping a long-lasting global financial order. After the Bretton Woods Agreement, the US dollar became the only post-war currency to be linked to gold. Later on, the US dollar began to challenge and even replace the pound as the new international reserve currency. Since America came out of the First World War relatively unscathed, but also being a significant recipient of wartime inflows. The economic impact of the First World War varied across different regions. While some countries experienced an economic boost due to a surge in government spending and increased production of war-related goods that stimulated certain sectors of their respective economies, others faced significant challenges and hardships. But the US was not among countries that recorded serious disruptions, rather benefited. As the global dependence on the dollar multiplied over time, the United States government has been able to borrow at lower costs, which has given the country an advantage of over $100 billion annually. The dollar has also allowed America to expand its influence to almost every other nation through political, social, and economic tactics. Take the United States Department of Treasury, for example. It not only exercises considerable oversight over swift financial transfer networks that are known to facilitate global transactions and enhance the efficiency of the entire global financial system, but also has a huge sway on global financial transaction systems. The department can impose sanctions on foreign entities and individuals that oppose the country's might, dictate prices on key global commodities like wheat, metals, and oil. The US dollar is essentially the default currency for international transactions and a global unit of account. Because of that, every central bank, treasury, or major firm on earth keeps a large portion of their foreign exchange holdings in US dollars. But in recent years, there has been a trend toward trashing the dollar. Yes, I'm talking about various countries seeking to eliminate their reliance on this powerful currency by diversifying their currency reserves and increasing their use of alternative currencies. This not only helps to mitigate the impact of economic and political challenges in America on their economies, but also gives these breakaway countries a chance to block external pressure from the US and its allies that may challenge their economies in catastrophic ways. Recently, China and Brazil reached an agreement to settle trade in each other's currencies. Over the past 15 years, China has replaced America as the new main trading partner of resource-rich Brazil, and as such, that shift may have been inevitable. But within the context of recent circumstances, this appears to be another in a series of recent blows to the central role of the dollar on global grounds. As of April 2023, more than 15 countries had already dropped the dollar, yet more countries are substituting this currency when executing trade transactions that were formerly carried out in dollars, whether it's buying major commodities like oil, buying US dollars for forex reserves, bilateral trade agreements, or dollar-denominated assets. The dollarization therefore proves to reduce and eliminate the dollar's power of global markets and in many ways threatens America, a superpower that is on the verge of being ousted by China. As countries continuously drop the dollar, one would ask how the dollar got so powerful in the first place that it even dominated global financial grounds. As I mentioned earlier, nothing gave the dollar so much power like the events that led to the Bretton Woods Agreement of 1944, which promoted bilateral trade amongst various countries in US dollars. Surprisingly, by the late 60s, holding US dollars was considered more profitable than holding stocks in gold, and so its holding was common, not only among individuals but also among nations. By the 70s, the Bretton Woods Agreement was almost invalidated after the dissolution of the London Gold Pool. This, however, helped Asian economies to start growing again. On the other hand, the US was facing a negative balance of payment crisis due to massive expenditures during the Cold War and the Vietnam War. To address America's economic issues during that time, President Nixon sought to cancel the convertibility of the US dollar into gold in 1971, thus delinking it from the value of assets of his country. After that move, the value of the US dollar was now dependent on its global demand, but not on the assets held by the American government, something that has not changed to this day. Later on, the advent of the petrodollars also helped to raise demand for the greenback. And to cope with the overwhelming demand that resulted from all this, America started printing more and more dollars. Since America was the biggest contributor to global agencies such as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, all its disbursements were also in US dollars, and as a result, Developing or underdeveloped countries were left with no choice except trading with other countries in US dollars. By the late 90s, nearly 90% of the global trade transactions were paid and received in dollars. As the hoarding increased, more dollars were printed to effectively handle this enormous demand. Today, as opposed to nearly $500 billion of gold reserves, the US has issued hard cash equivalent to nearly $4 trillion of worth. In addition, Treasury bonds that worth another $38 trillion, which is nearly 80 times the total assets of the US Treasury. The US thought that since the demand for its currency was high globally, it would continue to sail on its artificial bubble. To add some more effort to this idea, the country created war-like environments across the world in recent years, compelling countries to procure more arms, fuel, and other items from the global market. And when I say global market, I mean the same market that has been promoting trade in US currency for decades. But of course, more factors made the dollar dominance inevitable. Think about the IT boom of the 90s and how it strengthened demand for US dollars, as major IT companies were American and almost 80% of the IT global industry was based in the US itself. In addition, American sanctions also dealt with bilateral currency swap agreements between different countries to discourage trade in other currencies. I think that to better understand the threat that comes from the dollarization, we need to learn the reasons enabling this trend. You see, the reasons why various nations are delinking from the dollar come from issues such as concerns about the US economic policies, trade disputes, and geopolitical tensions. Take the post-coronavirus imbalances and the war in Ukraine, for example, events that strengthened pre-crisis trends in many countries of the world, including those caused by inflationary shocks, energy imbalances, and disruption of global supply chains. But there is more. One key issue that has been worrying more other countries that rely on the dollar in recent years gained more attention in 2014. It was then that the US imposed economic restrictions on Russia and created roadblocks in its trade. This was more than a wake-up call, and so several other countries increasingly started thinking of alternatives to avoid the use of the US dollar. Here in Europe, countries had already introduced the euro as a powerful joint currency, which helped in breaking the monopoly of the US dollar. However, over the last 8 years, more and more countries executed bilateral agreements to avoid a situation like Russia's. But as a result of the US economic restrictions move, Russia and China developed their payment gateway, and later, India and Russia also went into a similar agreement, linking the Reserve Bank of India and Russia's system for the transfer of financial messages, which is a Russian equivalent of the Western SWIFT financial transfer system that is developed by the Central Bank of Russia. According to the data from the World Gold Council, Russia has been the largest purchaser of gold among all central banks since 2014, meaning that the country has been steadily increasing its gold holdings for over a decade. China, on the other hand, has also increased its gold reserves, although at a slower pace than Russia's. Other BRICS member states such as India, Brazil, and South Africa have also been increasing their gold holdings, but at a much smaller scale than Russia and China. I want you to know that gold purchases by central banks can sometimes be influenced by a variety of factors, including domestic economic conditions, geopolitical risks, and diversification goals. But in this case, these actions also pose a question if these countries buy so much gold as another strategy in their preparations for ditching the dollar. Meanwhile, Brazil, China, Australia, Argentina, Egypt, Iran, Japan, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, Turkey, and some other countries in Europe have also executed bilateral agreements to bypass the US dollar's monopoly. In recent updates, the global de-dollarization campaign continues to gain momentum as countries around the world seek to find alternatives that can combat the dollar. Just a few months ago, or at a gathering, Kenya's President William Ruto advised his country's citizens and investors to let go of their dollar holdings. Countries are relentlessly working towards eliminating their reliance on the dollar. Examples include China and France's yuan-settled liquefied natural gas trade, where Chinese national oil company CNOOC and France's Total Energies executed a broad petrol and gas deal through the Shanghai Petroleum and Natural Gas Exchange in late March 2023. We also watched Russia turning to China's yuan amid geopolitical tensions over Ukraine, as a solution to ditch the dollar as a strategy for the world's largest nation to thrive in a US-sanctioned economy, and then the deal between China and Brazil that saw both countries agreeing to trade in their currencies. This trend has been effective in African countries too, where dollar-traded minerals are heavily concentrated, and as it spread, more African countries will be joining Angola, Zimbabwe, Liberia, Zambia, and the DRC to eradicate the US dollar. In Asia, countries will be joining ASEAN member states in cutting ties with the dollar. 10 countries under the Association of Southeast Asian Nations have been working towards using their currencies. This political and economic union had a meeting in Indonesia earlier this year, and their top of the agenda discussion was to stop their dollar dependency. But not just the dollar. They want nothing to do with the euro, the yen, or the pound. The organization also sought plans to stop executing country-to-country financial transactions in Western currencies. On the 7th of April 2023, Turkey's central bank announced new steps in line with its goals to boost dollarization and keep down its real government bond yields by raising the ratio of securities that banks must maintain if their real deposits amount to between 50 and 60% of their total deposits to 7 points from only 2 points. The Brics, which most of you know to be an acronym for 5 emerging economies consisting of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, are reportedly working on developing their joint currency that will bypass the dollar completely. Before most of this, the defining moment that triggered the fallout of the hegemon was in February 2022, when over $300 billion in Russian foreign reserves were frozen by the collective West. Since then, every other country on the planet began fearing for their dollar stores abroad. This absurd move had some comic relief, though the EU can't find most of it. All these actions indicate that more countries are waking up as they continue to acknowledge the dollar's volatility, and now many agree that moving away from the dollar, including Western payment systems, is necessary to protect transactions from possible geopolitical repercussions. Because of these actions, the dollar is meeting tremendous blows as more countries find ways to carry out trade on the international scene without involving it. As a result, not only has the total circulation of the US dollar in the world declined significantly, but also stocking has plummeted. Studies now indicate that global trade of the US dollar has declined by over 20% in the last 4 years alone. This can be reflected in the statement of the International Monetary Fund's foreign currency assets, where the share of the US dollar has been reduced from 71% in 1990 to 57% in 2021. Remember, these numbers exclude the dollar's further decline from a post-pandemic life that has seen several US bank failures in early 2023. The net cascading effect will be on the global circulation of the dollar. It is expected that the global use of the US dollar as a currency may decline further down to 45% or less within the next 2 to 3 years. The euro, which was trading below the dollar in past months, is now having an upper hand. Russia is trading in ruble against its cheap oil. Oil countries are dealing in Chinese yuan, Japanese yen, Saudi riyal, and the UAE dirham too. India is also trading with over 44 countries in the Indian rupee itself. We all know that when a country gives up the option to print its own money, it loses the ability to directly influence its economy, including its right to administer monetary policies and any form of exchange rate regime. This means dollarization has so many negative effects on economies, which is another reason for getting rid of it. But there are potential impacts of the dollarization on global trade, economic growth, and startups. The dollarization has significant implications for the entire global economy and the startup ecosystem. Although there are benefits to reducing reliance on the US dollar, the transition also poses challenges. Understanding these implications is crucial for businesses, investors, and of course policymakers, mostly when it comes to adapting to an evolving nature of international trade and finance, including slow growth, higher inflation, and increased financial risk. Despite the possibility of facing such risks, countries are not showing any signs of backing down from this trend. So how can persistent nations reach their goal without repercussions? I think addressing potential solutions to mitigate these risks. Countries may turn to increase their transparency, cooperation, and financial reforms. The campaign of substituting the dollar displacing it and entirely getting rid of it rages on. But this is a double-edged sword, and consequences could only be avoided depending on how this move is addressed. For countries aligning their currencies with the US dollar, obvious advantages include lower administration costs, a firm basis for a sounder financial sector, and lower interest rates. But there are disadvantages which include loss of monetary autonomy, seigniorage, and a vital national symbol, as well as greater vulnerability to foreign influence, which I think countries are getting rid of. Now, what is in it for countries that are cutting ties with the US dollar? The dollarization offers benefits such as more risk elimination power, strengthened national currency, increased monetary policies, independence, and reduced vulnerability to US sanctions. I think for nations to rely on other countries' currencies, take the dollar for instance, is a bad idea. And as much as there are consequences resulting from getting rid of the dollar, I will still be in support of the dollarization, considering that it offers positive, stronger, and crucial benefits such as financial privacy and self-dependency. However, the debate can still go on down in the comment section as one of the ways for you to stay informed and engaged with this issue. It is now conspicuous that depending on the world's most weaponized currency can massively affect its holders unexpectedly. In late April 2023, the dollar fell behind the yuan for the first time in Chinese cross-border transactions as the East Asian country pursued further use of its own money to avoid currency mismatches in trade. When you look at the numbers, the dollar share of global reserves was 73% in 2001, 55% in 2021, and 47% in 2022. The key takeaway is that last year, the dollar share slid 10 times faster than the average in the past 2 decades. And basing on that alone, now it is no longer far-fetched to project a global dollar share of only 30% by the end of 2024, coinciding with the next US presidential election. In this next video, which you can also find a link to down in the description, learn how a recent US banking catastrophe affected the United States dollar and how the fallout could continue to affect businesses, institutions, individuals, and countries that are connected to this currency. Thanks for watching.